Hi, everyone, and welcome back. It's time for more Confessions of Another Place and Time, the story that I wrote years ago and updated fairly recently. And this is the story of how an innocent joke, and I do mean innocent, turned into something so much more for me and for some other people involved. Now, I do want to say that I haven't said this yet, but the names of the two main characters, we'll call them, or people in the story, besides myself, have been somewhat changed to protect the not so innocent in some cases. So, anyway, I did change the names when I wrote this somewhat to do that. So, let's move on. So we left off with the fact that I had just found out that Charlie did admit to me, this supposed female writer, that he would consider having a relationship of some sort with a man, but he would much prefer a woman or a girl. So, with that in mind, I made that decision that, okay, there's a slim chance. Let me see if I can get that to work. So, that did face a challenge, though, because one day I was accidentally in line behind Bobby and Charlie in lunch again, and they were talking about the mystery person. Now, I don't think they knew I was behind them. Charlie told Robbie about the newest letter he had gotten and implied something that made it clear he thought that the mystery person was a guy and it was all a joke, and he said it was probably a gay guy. And he added, I've only been going along with it to humor whoever it is. I was suddenly really disappointed. I mean, I hoped that wasn't true. I hoped he meant the things he was saying. I didn't know, but could it all be lies? Again, I didn't know. I didn't want to believe that, but I began to do just that. But maybe Charlie was saying that specifically if he did know I was standing there. Many times when a person is lying, they don't see who's behind them unless they happen to look. So I just didn't know. Um, but I wanted to remember the early days when everyone was so excited about these letters and, it was new and fresh. And, it's about that time I decided it was time to take a break from doing the letters and give them a break. And so I let them know. I did tell them that by the end of the year, I would be revealing my actual true identity, and, that would also give them a chance that if that principal or vice principal or anybody was looking or watching the locker about that whole stolen coat incident, which I never did find out what happened to that coat. I don't know if Robbie did, but yeah, I could kind of let that die down. So um, Robbie and Charlie agreed, that hey, how about a break, and that was fine. And so the strongest part of the mystery person time period was done. It really was fun, rewarding, intriguing, and so many people had heard about it at school and enjoyed parts of it. None more so than Charlie and myself, though. I would never have had any interaction with him if not for this. I mean, we would have never met, and the rest of the story would not have been possible. So I was anxious to see the uproar when I unveiled my mysterious identity in May, because again, that was my senior year of high school. I was graduating in mid May, and I promised to go ahead and reveal my identity. The other part of this was that I hadn't yet come out to anyone at that point. Um, and so this would basically, well, it would be a coming out. Now, I think at that point, at some point in that year, I did come out to my two closest female friends, Heidi and April. I'm not exactly sure when, but the bottom line is that when Charlie started taking up so much thought in my brain, I knew that I had fallen in love with him. And I didn't really think I had a chance with him, to be honest, because even if he was slightly bisexual, I just didn't think that that was going to work out. And so I basically gave up on the idea so as I wouldn't be disappointed in the end. I thought like, it was like, why get my hopes up to get them dashed later? But I knew that his letters to me were not really to me, they were to the mystery person or who he thought this person was. So it was like a vicious circle in a way, getting these wonderful letters, hearing these spicy things and things that were fun to hear, especially at that age, but yet knowing they weren't really written to me as me. So I decided to give up on this whole idea of getting Charlie at some point, and in my mind, I did. Now, my best friend at the time, whose name is Portia, we met that year in school. She happened to be in the same grade or level that they were in, meaning Robbie and Charlie. And so I don't know how well she knew them. I mean, I don't think she knew them well at all. Just knew of them or saw them around. I decided that it was time to tell her because she didn't know, and again, she didn't know that I was gay. And it was time to at least tell someone. So, a guy that she knew named Bill Thomas was really a little bit of a quirky guy, and we had hung out with him a couple times outside of school. And, I wasn't one much for going out on, Friday nights or weekends, but that changed around that time. I started going out more often, and Portia was the main person I was going with, and Bill was around at times. We went to this area of town called Broad Ripple. If any of you are familiar with Indianapolis, you'll know what I mean. And Bill and his friend that he was with that first night, I think it was the first night we were together, they got into a lot of interesting conversations, and there was something that made me think that somebody involved might not be 100% straight. And I wasn't sure exactly what was said, but there was just some phrases like that. In fact, one night we were out with a guy that was from our school named Brian and Bill and Portia and I, and Brian was saying that there was a rumor around school that Bill was bisexual or gay. Now, Bill had always made me wonder about him just from, and I didn't know him well at all. Portia knew him a lot better than I did. Um, but he started talking and seemed quite excited. Brian chimed in and agreed and said he was bisexual. Um, Portia and Heidi were there, and they agreed. Well, we like guys too. And surprised, then they all looked at me for my confession. Um, Heidi already knew, actually. I mean, I had already told her at that point. Uh, but I went ahead and told them that I was gay. I mean, I finally felt safe enough and, ready to tell these folks that I was closest to, other than Heidi, who already knew, the truth. And, you know, Portia later said she pretty much knew it. She guessed it. Heidi just smiled, like I said, she already knew. And Brian then began a discussion on who we thought was cute around school. So it was a very comfortable group at that point. But that Bill part was still a little unknown. I don't believe he got in on that conversation in that way. Um, Now, right about that time, there was about just like 3-4 weeks left of school. It was like towards the end of, well, mid April for me, going towards end of April, and I decided to write Charlie and Robbie a note saying, "Hold your pants on for now. The mystery person will return very shortly to unveil." They began to wait anxiously for the day I promised would be within the next 2 weeks. Because, the end of school was coming up, and I just wanted them to know I'd be that last. Now, I didn't want them to know right then that that was my last week. It was a few weeks till everybody finished. And I started to worry about how that would go, and, how would I tell them, and how would they react. I didn't want anyone to be mad because this was never meant to be something that would hurt anybody, as I said at the very beginning, and this was certainly not meant to be a negative thing. It was just meant to be a positive, and to me, it certainly was. But also, what about all those other people, like in that lab science class that used to read those notes? What would they think? So I had to decide when was the best time to tell people. And for me personally, after a lot of thought, I decided, okay, I'm going to tell people on the very last day that I'm here at this school, meaning about who I was, who the mystery person was. And, towards the end of that day, because I didn't want to deal with any attitudes from other people. I wasn't really worried as much about Charlie and Bobby being so negative or something like that. but I would also say that other people you just never know what their reaction's going to be. So I sat down to write those letters, and this is what I said to Robbie. I said, "You were right in the beginning. This was all a joke. I do, however, like you a lot as a friend and had fun as your secret admirer." And then I gave him some clues as to who it was. I didn't actually put my name as to who this was, but I told them each two or three things that only they would know who that would be, meaning me. Um, so they also needed to know, of course, for sure that I was gay. Now, Bobby and I had been dealing with that and talking about that on and off for months, and I never really gave him a quote unquote straight answer. So, but it was pretty obvious between us. I was just confirming it, is all I was doing. In fact, I want to quote this. In the autograph book that he signed for me that last, month or so, he said specifically, "Rand, I hope you find some guy you can truly fall in love with, Robbie." And I knew he meant it even though it was written as a kind of a joke. But I was impressed at how far he seemed to come on his, he had seemed fearful of gay guys originally in the beginning of that year, and he seemed much more at ease. And I hope I helped with that. I mean, and the fact that he eventually realized before I even said it that I was gay. He asked me if I liked what he had written, and I said yes. We had several good times talking about this subject, and he even asked me what my family and others thought of this. But he never put me down. He remained a friend. I recall one of the last days in particular. I told him I thought everyone should just be free to experience their sexual feelings and desires. In other words, be true to themselves, which was my motto in life, is to thine own self be true, which is, of course, a Shakespeare quote. Also, in my last letter to him, I told him that Heidi had been telling the truth about me. To him, it was the official confirmation he needed to know. To others who might see it, it was unclear what I meant. I said my farewells and told him it had been so much fun for me as well. I thanked him for getting Charlie involved, and I would miss them both. And then the next step was to write the letter to Charlie. I had to once again let him know who I was without actually saying my name and letting him know that, yes, I was gay. And for him, I wanted to explain a little bit about why the whole thing happened and my true feelings for him and his side of the experience, because it was quite different than the one with Robbie. It was so different than that. In the actual letter, I wanted him to understand my feelings and tell him that I did fall in love with him. It started like this. "Dear Charlie, well, all good things must come to an end, and ours was truly a good experience. I had so much fun being your secret admirer, and I know you enjoyed it too." I then went through some of those good times we had had, and I told him it had been great to write him and that he had a lot of talent in writing. I explained it had been a joke with Robbie, one with good intentions, but I emphasized it had not been a joke with him. I felt all those things I had said. I meant every word I said. I loved him from afar, and I did want to have a relationship with him and make his fantasies come true. I also explained why I never let us get together. I told him who I was using not some so subtle clues. And, he would know what those were. I said, I wish also that I could help you live out your fantasies, but I'm not a girl, which is what you so obviously want so badly. Also, I hope you soon get the person who can help you get the workout you truly deserve. I told him that I had to force myself to stop loving him. I added that it had all been so much fun, and I hoped he would always remember it as a great time. I then said goodbye and asked him to give Robbie his note. I had been doing that lately due to the whole coat incident. And so I had written the two guys the letters that would fulfill my promises to them to tell them the truth about who I was, and therefore who the mystery person was. And now I just had to wait a few days and deliver it. It was a nerve-wracking 3 days. I read and reread those letters. I made changes, and, I wanted it to have a happy ending for all three of us. Of course, it could have blown up in my face, too. Thursday finally rolled around, and I could feel the undercurrent in Robbie and others at his lunch table. I mean, they were waiting. They knew. They were all waiting for this big announcement, and I felt butterflies. Lab science class, we said goodbye, all my classes. I took some pictures and did lab work and The seniors were getting excited. Our graduation was only 3 days away. It was really bittersweet for me. I mean, yes, I wanted to graduate and finish, but I hated the thought of, ending any time with Robbie and Charlie. I went on the important errand to drop off the notes in Charlie's locker during my sixth period computer literacy class. I went to locker T33 to deliver these messages, and then there was no turning back. I put them on the top shelf as usual, closed the door, and walked back to class. And after that, I went to await fate. I knew Charlie might be at his locker at that time since he came from study hall next door, and I can't imagine what they were thinking as they waited. I had already decided to go my normal route out of the school, and that would take me right past Robbie coming from the opposite direction. And that's exactly what happened. And he said goodbye. I could tell he hadn't seen the note yet, he hadn't gotten it yet, and so he didn't have any reaction about that. And maybe they didn't think this person was actually going to do it that day. I mean, I didn't give them a specific minute or something like that. And then I quickly went on to Charlie's locker bay, and he was there. His eyes met me oh so knowingly, and I waited for his reaction. A huge smile came across his face, and he chuckled. "It was you," he said, and I just smiled and felt a bit of guilt, but relieved. I quickly went on to, we said goodbye, and I moved on because we were both heading to the buses. I hated to leave him, to be honest. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what he was thinking, but he wasn't someone that was going to sit there and talk about it in public anyway. But his smile remained on his face, and I said, "Yeah, it was me." I was glad that he obviously wasn't angry, but at the same time I couldn't understand all that smile was saying. Maybe more in mine than his. I had half expected him to be mad. After all, it was he who had gotten so involved with this hot girl and spilled so many secrets. But at that moment I was grateful and very happy. Charlie and I said goodbye, and fate drew us onward. I just about ran to my bus at that point. I was happy. And I was coming back the next day for graduation practice, so I knew that I could check in with Robbie and Charlie again. And I had to find out what Robbie was thinking. So the next day I woke up, I immediately felt jitters, and I couldn't remember why for a minute. And then I was like, did that really happen? Did I really tell them the truth? Or was it a dream? It wasn't a dream. Anyway, I made arrangements to pick up my two friends to go with me, Heidi and Carla, and we chatted, but I could only think about the unveiling and the implications it had. There was a senior breakfast they had, and all of this was going on. We were talking, people were taking pictures, more autographs, etc. But I left after a short time to go try and find Robbie and Charlie. I knew where they would be. I went to Robbie's class first, but he wasn't there. Maybe the shock had been too much for him. And then on the way, I stopped by Charlie's business class to get one more look. Love makes you do some wild things. He wasn't there yet either. And I said out loud, "Where is he?" And sure enough, I turned around, and guess what? There he was, right there. And I was so embarrassed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think he just heard me. I felt stupid, but he didn't know what else to say. Well, I did say when I finally came across Bobby, and I said, "Were you surprised?" I felt stupid saying that, but I didn't know what else to say. And just then the bell rang. He was going into class, and he just said, "Yeah, I was surprised." He wasn't smiling and turned away. The bell rang, and the teacher shut the door. It was obvious he was mad. I walked away feeling badly, but knowing that was understandable. But the thing I wanted least in the world was for Robbie to be mad because of the mystery person. I mean, I started the whole thing as a fun thing to amuse us all, and just, it was never meant to be anything negative. So I was just really disappointed, but not surprised that he was angry, or it seemed that way. So graduation came and went. The one thing that happened at graduation, I don't think either of those two were there. I mean, they weren't in that grade, obviously, was that as I was coming off the stage, I looked a guy that was in the little chorus that they had there to play for, the ceremony, and there was someone that looked at me and then turned to someone next to him and then whispered and kind of laughed. And I knew, he had heard, he was part of, the group that knew. But at that point, you know what? I didn't care. I was getting out of the school. It did not matter to me. That experience was well worth any of the occasional things that I heard in the hallways. Um, so I told I told Portia about this whole thing that had happened. She didn't know up till that point. Because remember, I was keeping this very quiet. And Portia was really interested to hear all the details. So we went out, we talked about it, and turned out, here I am thinking, I can't have Charlie, and Charlie wants a girl, and Charlie always told me to let him know if I knew of any girls who were interested in him. Well, Portia thought he was cute, and Portia was interested. She just was looking for a boyfriend. She thought, oh yeah, I would love to go out with him. So I decided to let Charlie know that I did know a girl who was interested in him. And the way I chose to get a hold of him turned out to be very important. What else? I wrote him a letter. Um, I called up the mystery person from retirement. I wrote a short, sweet note explaining I missed him, but I now know of a girl who was interested. She thinks you're really cute and has the hots for you. And if you'd like to find out who she is and get her number, call me today after school. I gave him my phone number and could only wait to see if he would respond. I couldn't imagine, but deep down I also wanted to hear his voice on the phone. Now, I had to go back one last time to school to get some things from the AV advisor that I had worked with, including a VHS, yes, VHS copy of our graduation that she had made, and I had asked for a copy. So I went there, and that was how I dropped off that letter at Charlie's locker. Um, they were, that day I got to eat lunch with Portia and her table, and so that was the same lunch Charlie and Robbie and their table was at. So of course they saw me. I think the one thing, this was a couple days later, I think. The one thing that was good was that Robbie, when he saw me, he gave me a sly, kind of reproving smile, like a parent who's caught his son in a cookie jar or something. But he was seemingly not mad at that point. So I don't think he took very long to get over being mad, if he was mad. That's just the way it came across to me. Certainly never said anything. Um, I can imagine that he felt like, a little bit foolish. He had sort of been taken in, but that was not my intention. Charlie's look was somewhat questioning. He seemed to keep giving me glances every now and then, and I just gave them all a look of confidence. I was happy to see them passing my latest note, and I emphasized in that note, by the way, that I did not steal that jacket. Um, and I decided to try to talk to Charlie alone since I was expecting a response from him about the girl, the one that I told him liked him. So I assured him that wasn't a joke. After lunch, I went back to his locker where he usually went, and he was there, and he said, hey, what do you want, man? He obviously didn't know what to say. I put on a forceful attitude and just asked, are you going to call to ask me about that girl I mentioned? Because I don't know why, but I didn't want to talk about it there at school, and I didn't have a lot of time. I mean, I was done now, and I wasn't supposed to be there for long. He said, are you serious about her? And I said, yeah, she's really got the hots for you. He said, okay, I'll call you. He seemed really interested, and I was excited at the thought of him calling me. Um, so, the day wrapped up, and I was waiting for Charlie to call me, and that would be the next important step in the progression of what happened with Charlie and I in 1985. It was about to be the summer of 85, and let me tell you, it was so alive for us in 85. So, I will continue the story in the next part. I hope you're enjoying this true story from my life. Um, I'm thinking this would be 5 or 6 parts. This was the third part. So stick with it because the best is literally yet to come. And I hope it was, or it is, as interesting to you now as it was to me almost 40 years ago. Take care, everyone. I'll talk to you later, and goodbye.